Well, Cam, we have been talking about season two of The Night Manager for quite some time, it feels like. We've been preparing for it. We have been gestating, waiting, and it's finally out. We can finally talk about it. And I thought, well, why don't we celebrate? Why don't we bring
Mm.
on the man behind The Night Manager? Joining us on the show, screenwriter, theatrical director, and associate director of the RSC from Hannah to The Night Manager, it's the one and only David Farr. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks, Scott. How are you?
I'm living the dream. Well, that's what they like to say anyway. Yeah. Well, I kind of like a little bit of backstory for me and Cam. This show we've been doing for years and years and years. We're spy movie and TV aficionados. We love all of it. We first actually stumbled upon you before Night Manager came along with Hannah, the
Sure.
the movie. We love that film.
Oh,
Um,
thank you.
and I think we've also had Seth Lockhead on who did some of the script along with you as
Right.
well. So
That's right.
it's nice to unite the two Hannah worlds, as it were, now. And I want to get into Hannah. I have a lot to ask, but I want to take us back and then perhaps do Night Manager and then come back to Hannah. Very discombobulating, but we'll get there.
That's fine.
Getting started with screenwriting. I know obviously other things you've worked on in the theatre, but for screenwriting particularly, because I know one of your first credits is actually on MI5 slash Spooks. So
That is my first credit. That's the first thing I ever wrote for television. Yeah.
there you go. So you were in the spy world from day one.
Yes, I was. It was I was a strange thing because I was only writing for theatre and only thought of myself as a theatre person.
Mm,
And at that time, perhaps being honest, television on the whole wasn't that exciting. It's certainly not in the way that it is now. And then suddenly this little opportunity came up to write for Spooks, which it was partly, to be honest, at the time I thought, oh, that's money, that's exciting, it's TV, and
sure.
then it turned out to be a much better experience than I predicted, and a much better show actually, to be honest, because it was I think I joined it pretty early on,
Hmm.
and yeah, it was a complete training in how to write TV. I think I must have ended up doing about nine of them. A total training in how to write stories over 1 hour. Uh, Possibly the best training I could probably have had for later on.
What were the biggest misconceptions you had going in about writing for television?
I think the obvious ones that a snobbish theatre director would have, that everyone would be stupid, which wasn't true. And of course, it really helped that the lead writer at that time, there were two, but the one I met most and talked mostly to was Howard Brenton, who I think Scott will probably know vaguely, very big theatre
Hmm.
writer, sorry, playwright, brilliant playwright. Wrote Pravda, which was all about Russians, sort of Secret Service and Cold War. So he was involved, and suddenly all my delusions fell apart very, very quickly. I realized that actually that a lot of the skills that I had and was interested in the theatre were in fact the same, whether it be
Mm.
ideas or just how voices sound, how characters are created. The difference was a kind of insane rigor over storytelling and plotting, which actually I found myself nerdily quite excited by. So I also discovered my inner nerd, which was quite enjoyable.
It's the right genre to do it because
Yeah.
there's so many little Easter eggs you leave along the way when you're writing these sort of things. You have to think in a broader scale instead of just the now. Well, how about we just jump into the Night Manager and we're
Sure.
walking that way. So when does that first phone call come to you about the Night Manager? How did you get connected to the project?
Yeah. So I just simply get a phone call from my agent saying a company called the Ink Factory, who are
Mm.
related to John le Carré, though, in fact, his sons, like your writing, both theatre and I think Hannah was relevant, definitely the film. And would you be interested in adapting The Night Manager, the book? And what I don't know if they knew, I don't think they did know, was that my dad, I was brought up in Guildford in England, very nondescript town, to be honest. And my dad was an insane Le Carré fan. He had lots of the books. He's a surveyor, and he wasn't a big literary. I don't think my dad's a big literary guy. I think he'd admit that, but he had a certain writers he really loved, and that was one. He was what was one of the key one. And and then we watched Alec Guinness in Smiley's People. I was a bit young for Tinker Tailor. I watched that later, and it blew my head off. And I always remember the scene where Alec Guinness visits Beryl Reid playing Connie Sachs, and she's this alcoholic, and she's sort of gone to seed, and it's an incredibly heartbreaking scene. But what drives it is his need for information, and
Mm.
he's got to get information out of her. But can she remember because she's so boozed up? and it's heartbreaking, and yet the plot drives it because he has to find out this crucial information he needs to find out. And it's just and it's quite long. It's, by TV standards, it's a long scene, and it's quite theatrical. And I don't mean that in a bad sense. I mean, it's theatrical in the sense that it's quite lengthy and there's a dramatic structure to the scene just between two people, and you're totally gripped. So that's what they didn't know. And then, so I was like, yes, of course, I'd like to meet tomorrow, please. And it transpired that they were really quite serious about me doing it. I didn't feel like there were 20 people being met. And then the strangest coincidence, which is that Le Carre himself had a sister called Charlotte, who sadly has died also, and she was an actress. And he went to see a production of Hamlet at the RSC with her in it. She was playing Gertrude, and he absolutely loved it. And then looked at the name of the director, and it was also me, basically. And he couldn't make sense of it. He thought it must be a different person. But it turns out, because I had this weird double identity at the time, like a good spy should. And he put the two and two together. And at that point, bizarrely, I think he got fixated with the idea that I had to do it, which is, I kind of, not that rational, but I think it makes a lot of sense instinctively to me. So he suddenly went, I think this guy's really interesting. And then therefore I got to meet the great man, which was, obviously a very exciting moment in my life.
Well, it must have felt like.
Go ahead, Scott. Well, I was
The
going to
first
say, what were those? Yeah, the conversations with Le Carre about adapting it. How did?
Oh,
that
I mean,
sort of process
he was very demanding, and he wanted to know exactly what the pitch was. For those people who don't know, the book was written in '93, I think. It's one of his very first post-Cold War novels, and he's still, I think, discovering how to do them, to be really honest. And it's set in Central America. It's very related to Oliver North and the whole Arms for Iran and so on scandal. None of which, of course, would be relevant to an audience in 2014. And he wanted me to, the challenge, which had already been laid at my door, was how would you update this? How would you make this relevant for now? We'd just been through the Arab Spring, and for personal reasons, I'm very interested in that. And it was such an important moment. And so my very simple approach and pitch to him was, I want to do the whole thing as a post-Arab Spring essay about the way arms and money hurl themselves into a situation like that, cause chaos. But behind it was I think, as Le Carre deserves, a very serious, in a way, a very serious intellectual essay. And then the rest of the time was spent hiding that amongst a whole lot of very enjoyable, fun spy and Easter eggs, as you were saying earlier, Scott, sex, glamour, escapism, glamorous islands. But sitting underneath the whole thing was what happens when you have an explosion of what seems like a fabulous moment in history, a democratic movement that wants to find freedom. And then the absolute tragic truth of it all, which I think Egypt, more than any other, proves to this day, of what actually happens in a country, and who moves in. The pariahs move in, the coyote circle. And it's awful. The ropers of this world make money. And he loved it. He thought that was everything he wanted. Le Carre was at that point, I'm guessing, in his 70s, late 70s, maybe even. And he just wanted to be relevant. He wanted to be current. And he was very knowledgeable. So we spent hours, because he, of course, he has an extraordinary history in the intelligence services and as a writer researching. He's had extraordinary access, much more than I've ever had, because of who he is. And so he could spin stories to me of roguish deals in Iraq or in Syria, and bad behavior by British spies and by American spies. And it all started to feel very fertile very quickly. And I sort of knew by the end of the evening, which was in a pub in North London, I just knew I had it. It was just, you just know sometimes. Yeah, I was like, yeah, this is happening.
Well, it seems quite like almost naturalistic in a sense, where like you fit together. He saw your production at the Globe and saw your name.
It was not at the Globe, just to.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just to give the RSC their credit, it was in Stratford. Yeah.
Fair play, fair play. I like the correction, but yeah, so it almost feels like. I mean, I'm not a big believer in fate, but that feels fated.
Yeah, I'm a bit more of a believer in it in some weird way. That did feel fated. It only a couple of times happened to me in my life. One time with Harold Pinter and one time with him, where I just felt like this just feels right. And so yeah, it felt very good. And his sons Simon and Stephen were very, warm in their embrace as well, which really mattered. So there's a big thing around them as a family. You know, it's a very intimate family business, and if you're not in that family, I think it's something that it takes quite understandably a while to be accepted. You know, even as a kind of little surrogate member, and they were that's I think inevitable with any kind of intense family affair, which theirs is. You know, they're a very close family. Obviously, you know, sadly, David, as his real name is, has died now. John le Carre has died now, but it was a very close knit thing, and to be allowed in was yeah, definitely a privilege.
I suppose, you know, I was a few months back. I spoke with David Eldridge, who did the Spider-Man Came from the Cold production here in London. I think it's going on tour soon as well. And he spoke about, because he met John le Carre at the start of this as well, and he spoke about having that meeting in a sense, and then the moment afterwards where you go, "Oh crap, I have to actually go and do this now." And sort of the daunting task. You know, Spy Came from the Cold has a certain legacy to it. The Night Manager, you're almost, I mean, it's a known book, but it hasn't got perhaps some of the shadow of, say, what Richard Burton had brought to it in a sense. You were going in bringing a fresh visual interpretation of a book. Did you feel that pressure when you started to make the sort of adaptation, or were you just bullish into it?
A little bit blissfully unaware, I think, in some ways, but partly because of what you say, that the book isn't as well known, not even close to being as well known.
Hmm.
And also um, any attempt to make it had failed in the past. There had been some attempts to make it as a movie.
Right.
In particular, I think Sidney Pollack was the director, particularly interested in doing it. Brad Pitt, I think, had an interest. There were people, actually, Hugh Laurie himself wanted to play Pine way back in the day.
Right.
Um, but it had never happened, and it felt like a bit an opportunity, to be honest. It is more exciting for me to tell a story that people don't really know than one that they do. That I think is more pressurizing because you've got to reinvent or find your particular angle, and sometimes that can become a slightly contrived affair. And it didn't. I just felt like, no, okay, all I have to do is tell this fundamental story of these two men, and I've always been interested in that in terms of espionage. I've always found the notion of simply revolving around two people, don't have to be men, of course, but two people to be such a simple. I mean, that is what Smiley and Carla is.
Hmm.
And I think Le Carre is very good at it. And it interests me around things such as doubles and Freud and shadows and all of these very psychoanalytic things that I think for some reason fit spies very well. So I didn't ever feel, I just felt very quite at home with it. And I did just go for it, to be honest. I enjoyed it.
What were the most difficult elements of the book to adapt, or the ones that maybe kept you up at night?
Well, for me, it's always the plotting because I'm very comfortable with the emotional narrative. I kind of feel that and know what that is. Maybe that's the playwright in me. I am not. I don't pretend to be a kind of technical spy writer. Yeah, I think that's a real skill. It's not really the thing that I'm most interested in, but I know you need it. So the bits that were for me most challenging were, yeah, the technicality of exactly how this deal is happening and allowing. We none of us wanted it to be plotty and that annoying. We actually wanted the opposite. But in order for that to work, you've got to have enough tension underlying it for everyone to enjoy the character scenes and not feel like, yeah, okay, but what's going on here? So that I loosely use the word suspense. That suspense of like, we know something's going on under the surface of this party while everyone's hanging around a swimming pool. We know there's enough going on plot wise to sustain the character developments. That stuff in the middle, I think, was the most challenging section. The other thing I wouldn't, yeah, now I'd mention it is in the book. There's a huge amount of backstory to Pine, of all sorts of
Hmm.
adventures he goes on, and we had to compress a lot of that. So episode 2 was the episode I spent the most time on, how to structurally earn that, because I really wanted not to, I really wanted, for example, to do the Cornish section. There were voices saying just don't do it,
Hmm.
Hmm.
but I just felt like the whole experiment in identity that the Night Manager partly is, this guy just invents himself with these different people, different names, and I just felt if you lost the Cornish bit, you would lose two of those identities. You would never really buy into him. Actually, you'd never really believe that Roper would let him back in. There are sort of all sorts of things that were at play in those decisions. But I do remember the moment I felt like I got episode 2 was weirdly a structural decision to actually start at the end of the episode. Weirdly, when at that, I don't know if you remember, but there's a sort of big party in the restaurant,
Hmm.
which and then you flash back
Yes.
and you work
Yeah.
out how Pine got there, and that's when I suddenly went, okay, this episode's going to work now because I feel the hook of it, and
Hmm.
I can therefore earn myself the right to take a little bit more time on his character.
It's interesting that you talk about like the plotting, and Scott and I tackle a different spy movie every single week. And one of
Okay.
the things that's really difficult, one of the toughest balances, is actually character and emotion versus the heavy plotting. And we fall often into the, well, this plot made no sense at a certain point, and it was so focused on the plot. And that was one of the things what The Night Manager was. It was very complex, but it moved. Like, it really had a brisk pace, and it was so involving. And I mean, I'll give you just the props on that. That's something that I don't see done really well very often.
Oh, well, I mean, I give a lot of credit to the raw material of the book. He sets
Hmm.
up. I mean, in the first half, I think there are some huge similarities. The second half, I have to say, we did move away from the book,
Hmm.
and he encouraged me to do that. He he was of the view that the second half of the book, he slightly fell back on his Cold War writing experience, and there's a lot of stuff in London and a lot of what was Leonard Burr. I changed it to Angela Burr, doing a lot of work behind the scenes, the stuff that it carries is brilliant at. But actually, for the drama, and I think probably just to move Le Carre into the new world, it felt like no, the answers to our drama have to be actually with Pine and with Roper, and we have to stay with those two guys. So the second half is quite radically different, and yeah, that's why I mention it. Really, is that it was the hardest bit to make the plot solid, and yet it will not be the kind of show where people are kind of sitting around a table discussing the plot, which we did do
Hmm.
in Spooks, for example. There was a thing, I can't remember what we called it, but you would actively say we want those scenes around a meeting room where everyone tells you what's essentially going on, and they have a debate. And that it was just a different type of show and a different
Yeah.
era. And they were quite fun. They were fun to write. People disagreeing, and people they're quite fun scenes. West Wing does those as well. But we didn't want to. That was the absolute opposite of what we wanted to do, and we kept, in a sense, talking about cinema uh,
Hmm.
as cinema, I suppose, tries to avoid that and tries to essentially use language that is visual rather than verbal. And I think we loosely speaking, on the whole, tried to obey that as a language, as our dominant language.
I want to talk about casting in a second because it's something that the cast of your show is also mostly in season two, so we'll talk about that as well. But you mentioned John le Carre and sort of a little bit of him being involved. Of course, it's his story, it's his book. What was that process like of putting the script together for the first season, and how sort of collaborative was it with John?
I mean, it was collaborative when he had time for it to be, because
Sure.
he was writing a book.
Yeah.
I think he was writing Legacy of Spies, and one of them, one of those ones in that period. So he was down in Cornwall doing his thing, and then suddenly I'd get an email saying, yeah, loving, wonderful scene, but and then suddenly a bit of dialogue or something that he wanted to put. Just something that is that sort of input of energy. So, but no really big conceptual conversations after that initial one,
Mm.
except for a crucial conversation around the gender of Burr, because uh, I was encouraged to. There was a very sensible discussion saying, look, the part of Jed need what we need to, we need better female roles in this,
Hmm.
and they were trying to get me, push me to make Jed bigger or something. And I was like, well, Jed is Jed. She's going to be great, but she is what she is, which is Roper's trophy, and her journey is to free herself from this trophiness.
Hmm.
But that's not going to be enough. So I proposed we switched Leonard Burr to Angela Burr. Um, and so that, because of course that gives it a completely different, whole different kind of female character. And turns out to be, I think, a really exciting decision. Obviously, we got Olivia, which suddenly changes absolutely everything, because Olivia Cotter
Hmm.
does change absolutely everything. But Le Carre initially was the only thing he was resistant to, which surprised me. But it's because he sees his characters so vividly in his head, and he
Yeah.
literally had an image of a Yorkshireman of a certain type, Ian Holm or someone, and he
Mm.
knew exactly. And it took a while. And actually, I think it really only he only really became reconciled to it when he heard Olivia wanted to do it, at which point he was suddenly like, yeah, of course, that's marvelous, totally brilliant, and we must get her immediately. And she's pregnant, brilliant. We'll put that in the script. And he embraced, as I had to do as well. He embraced everything, the everythingness that Olivia was at that moment.
Well, you speak about Olivia, but I mean, we haven't really spoken too much about Tom Hiddleston, and you mentioned Hugh Laurie very briefly, but the two are producers on the show as
Mhm.
well. How
Mhm.
early were they involved, and how important was that casting? And did you have those people in mind when you were writing it?
I didn't have either of them in mind, because I don't really do that
Yeah,
as a
Mhm.
as because it'll end in disappointment most of the
sure,
time.
sure, yeah.
So I don't do that. I do now, of course. But no, they came on after I think two episodes. which was early, which was great. And then, and that was a huge vote of confidence. And it was, and that moment, everyone, I think, was like, oh, this is happening. This is a thing that is happening. And they were just very committed. Hugh is a huge Le Carre lover.
Yes.
Probably more knowledgeable than anybody else. He's really, he really, and knew him, and so he was passionate about the whole project. It's he's a very passionate guy, very very smart, unbelievably intelligent man, and that was very interesting. And then Tom is much more instinctive, I would say, and just got it. Just for him, it was his. I guess, yeah, he got it from a moral, ethical point of view, which I think interested him. And he's just a very committed guy, Tom. He's once he goes for something, he doesn't hold back. But he's a very easy person to work with, which I don't think everyone necessarily would expect. But he's easy to work with because he's very respectful, very clear about what the script does, what he needs, what he can take on, what the director does. So yeah, it was it's just a ludicrous. And then to add Olivia Colman, Tom Hollander to that, and others, Tobias Menzies, etc., just a crazy cast, which I don't take the credit for, by the way. I mean, they were found by wonderful casting team, amazing.
It is quite nuts going back to that first season and just thinking about those names that have either continued to be huge stars or have gone to be even bigger stars. I mean, you can start with Tom Hiddleston. I mean, he had done the Marvel films at that point, but this was really his line in the sand. This was really where he put that stamp on things. I think for a lot of people, and I speak moving to my question. It's almost you write in a James Bond film, you have an idea that a certain amount of people are going to turn up to a theater to watch a James Bond film because there's just that sort of backing behind it. It's Bond. Okay, you're adapting a John le Carre book that not many people know about. It's not his biggest book, so you've kind of got that agency to do what you want. But this show becomes water cooler television. People are clamoring for more Night Manager. I remember getting people talking to me at work about it. It was all anyone could talk about was that season as it was on the air. Did you have any sense during the production that it would just spark like that?
No, I mean, I was confident that it would be good because of the people we had in it. Susanna Beard's a very good director. I just thought it's going to be good. And there was a lot of energy. There's a thing that happens with something when you can feel there's a lot of energy behind it in a slightly amorphous way, this Hollywood way. And I felt, and of course, I was quite new. I'd never written anything for television except for Spooks. And suddenly I was writing this. And so it wasn't like I'd done 3 or 4 other things. I didn't have much to compare it to, put bluntly. So I didn't really know. And yeah, then suddenly when it came out, you could feel it immediately like this. It was, and it was that era where what people called, I don't know, premium TV or something, where television that was trying to push towards being cinematic. Susanna did all the episodes, for example. That's not perhaps normal for a director.
Sure.
There were decisions we made that were the way we shot it in terms of the big locations we could go to, which meant we had to shoot it totally out of chronology because we were doing it which meant that the scripts had to be absolutely watertight. That was quite unusual because, I mean, you hear stories, I'm sure where shows they haven't even finished the writing when they start the shooting. That was completely impossible because we had this location led, but it meant we could go to amazing places as long as the scripts could hold up on the way. And that was quite stressful at times because it was like there was more pressure on that than would be normal. So that all meant I thought we're trying to do something ambitious here. And the producers were very clear about that. Stephen Garrett and Stephen Cornwall were very clear about that this was something that they had an aspiration as producers to make something that was closer to what cinema. I think now, of course, television is so celebrated as a form, we don't say that anymore. Almost that idea has gone away. But at the time, I think that was still a very strong motivation.
Well, I mean, season 1 grabbed everyone, as Scott said, and then you have basically 10 years until the second season. What was the reasons for the delay, and also was it scary going back?
Yeah, that was much scarier. So the real truth of it, I think I have told this before, but in short, I genuinely thought I'm here to adapt a book. I was very respectful of le Carre, and the one time I got the fear was when we won awards for various things, and it was, you say, it was a big hit, and then everyone turned around and going, so season 2. as if
Mhm.
I had it in my back pocket, and it would just be a case of pulling it out. And I was like, I don't have one. And no one mentioned it to me. It's a limited series was the word I learned to use. That's what we were in American terminology. And
Yeah.
this is what we are. And then suddenly I'm told, no. That was last year. Now we're not that. Now we're looking at, and I just didn't have a very good idea in my head. I was like, this is going to feel contrived. I'm going to end up with a lot of speedboats and no real soul. I could just
Mhm.
feel it because there was something about the way it ended that you just couldn't magically just, it would feel very Return of or something. It would just feel very contrived is the only word. So after I did sort of look at it for about literally a few weeks, and then much to Simon Cornwall's annoyance, and we're very good friends now, so I can say this with, I just sort of went, I just don't think I have it. I don't feel it. And at that moment, by complete coincidence, a wonderful, wonderful man called Tom Cohen had the idea of turning Hannah into a television
Mhm.
series, and there were stories I hadn't told in the film that I really wanted to do, and that I felt completely solid and safe. And maybe it was just the slightly conservative small town boy in me, but I just went, that I know, this I have no idea,
Mhm.
and it could be so bad, and it could ruin everything good that we've done. So I ran, basically, I fled. They were not that happy about it, but it was an honest reaction, and
Mhm.
they understood, they really understood. I'm not saying, and then the years passed, and I think they had discussions about other, were there other ways to go. Nothing came of those. And then literally in autumn of 2020, almost exactly as Le Carre is sadly dying, I have this very clear idea, as sometimes happens, just lying in bed in the middle of the night. I see very clearly an image of we're in Colombia, and I see this kid who I know, I can tell you now because with the thing is out, spoiler about to come.
Mhm.
Who this kid who is Roper's other son, and
Mhm.
he's 7 years old. He's in a monastery, and it's all about other sons and other fathers, and because the whole of the carry, in my view, is a sort of father-son thing that's always going on.
Sure.
Even Pine is sort of a surrogate son, the son that Roper wished he'd always had, if you
Mhm.
like. And this character came to me, and I thought that's a great story. And then out of that, okay, he's been buried in sand for God knows how many years. He's come back to Columbia. It's the only place he can go. It's the only place he's safe. He has old friends here. He's going to rebuild. That just felt in thrillingly exciting. And then all I
Mhm.
had to work out from that was, okay, how does this bump into Pine? And what's been happening to him? And Tom and I had discussions because he's very open to that kind of thing. And we talked about all the various options. And I decided it would be the most bold thing would be that Pine has actually decided to bury that entire past and just try and live a grey, normal life and see if it can work. Because he damaged a hell of a lot of people in the first season, particularly, Sophia Alakan dies because of him. Jed nearly dies because of him. That it's a brutal thing he's done. So he decides to put that away, and I just loved the idea that suddenly the ghost of Roper, what we call the dragon's breath, just starts to float back into his nostrils, and he begins to sense something, that all is not as it seems, that this man is maybe not dead after all. And that immediately I felt like that's a great story. I want to see that.
It's one of those things. I think quite an important show for Tom. I've got the impression over the years, and I imagine for Hugh and the rest of the cast as well. But it's one of those shows I've seen Tom get questions about. When is season 2 coming of the Night Manager? And this is in like 2019, 2021, that sort of stuff, before anything's even announced. So he must have had that burning desire somewhere in him to do it as well. Which brings me to my question, because and you said it there, but I will just alert everyone listening. We're going to talk full spoilers of season 2. It's all on the air now. We could talk about it, and we will be dropping spoilers. You can go watch it and come back if you want. You've been warned. Roper. So of course Tom Hiddleston's back. It's about, Pine is kind of the central leading character of the show. Was there ever a pitch of doing it without Roper, or was it always you had to have the two?
For me, never, because of what I talked about earlier. That for me, the interest in the piece, and I use this word very carefully, but it's almost the erotic. I use that word. Everyone goes thinks I'm being mad, but I don't know any. Think you can think of a better word, but it's the weird attraction, repulsion,
Mhm.
Yeah.
erotic between these two men. That's what interests me. Father son. There is I mean, Le Carre, just to be serious for a second, has a very strong homoerotic quality to much of his work, right? Tinker
Yep.
Tailor Soldier Spy. It's there. It's just sits there in that very British way. No one talks about it, and it sits there, and it's true in our one. So the idea that you would then just take away that Pine would have nowhere to go, like to spin on his own axis. So no, not even remotely. I loved the idea of tricking everyone that that might be the case. That was fun. And I also
Certainly got me.
Oh, well, that's amazing. I can't believe we got away with it because he was shooting for like 4 months or something. But anyway, luckily some of it was in Colombia, which is a very good place to hide. Whether or not you're Roper or Hugh Laurie, it turns out to be a very good place to hide. But yeah, so it was absolutely no, it was always key. There are sort of for those spy sort of literary nerds, there are maybe two books that I'd reference that I think are really important for me. One is Under Western Eyes by Joseph Conrad, which is not the most famous, but it is sort of a spy novel, but it's absolutely about a man who replaces another man. It's a brilliant novel. And then there's the Quiet American by Graham Greene. Again, it's two men, and they haunt each other in this. And so for me, and then of course Carla and Smiley, that's the other one. So for me, I can't imagine. Oh, and the third man. So you've got constantly you've got this thing of one man, another man, a shadow to the other, and so no, it's impossible to imagine the story without one without the other. To be honest.
Well, how did you come up with the idea of basically building the season around Teddy? And if you could talk a little bit about creating that character and then casting that character.
Yeah, he was the idea. So nothing would have happened if it hadn't been for him popping into my head. And it was such an amazing moment. The only thing was,
Yeah.
I didn't know if they were already making it or what was going on. So it was a great relief to find out that no, they haven't, they decided not to do anything until they were sure. And they loved the idea. And as soon as he came to me, I had a little bit of Edmund in King Lear in my head. So that's the kind of bastard son who's in the Shakespeare, he's the malcontent. um, I didn't quite want a pure malcontent. I wanted someone who looked like he was that, and then I wanted to suddenly thought, no, I want what I think would be amazing would be to make it seem like that's what he is, but actually then to unveil something completely different. And the ultimate challenge would be to start with a character you find terrifying and end up with a character you just genuinely fall in love with. That would be the perfect thing. Um, to find an actor who would do that again, have a kind of, shall we say, sexually fluid thing going on
Mm-hmm.
in that that was a hugely, that was scary because and also could speak English really well. It was just that was like, are we going to find the person? And then Diego Calva just walks in and it's just like unbelievable. It's literally, that's him. It's literally him. He's an amazing guy, stunningly beautiful actor, very handsome, which always helps. And he's very beautiful to work with, but he understood it. And he understood everything about Teddy's lack of identity, his need for approval, his desperate search for some kind of confirmation. And the fact that deep down, he just wants to go home, really, if
Mm-hmm.
he actually admits it to himself, but he can't. He's gone too far. It's very Catholic. There's a tremendous sense of sin, which I think is also relevant in almost a lot of very good spy work. The fallen angel kind of
Mm-hmm.
idea. Someone who's, and that, so there's so much there, and he just got it. He did it. He got it very quickly. I didn't have to talk to him at any length, to be honest. He was like, he's one of those guys that just kind of goes, nods and just goes, yeah, yeah. He's like, yeah, I got it, man. You
Got
don't
it.
need to tell
Yeah.
me. Yeah.
I'm an actor. I've got it.
Yeah, he does. It's really interesting. So Camille, who plays Roxana, is the opposite. She wants to talk and she wants to understand everything. She wants to know the history in the back. She's amazing, very, very clever. Diego doesn't want that. And that's what I love about acting, is that you can have completely different processes. They're both equally valid. It's what the actor needs to be truthful for themselves. That's what matters.
Well, you talk about like some of the challenges, and one of the big challenges for you was you didn't have something until the idea of Teddy came along, but also the challenge of not having a book
Yeah,
with this. That you are also creating new canon, as it were, in this
yeah,
Night Manager universe. Was that a daunting task
yeah.
to tackle? And I don't want to say you were, of course, you were drawing on the source material, but were you drawing on anything else to help you inform this story?
It was daunting. I think one thing that helped was that nobody wanted to make it unless we knew it was going to be good enough. So
Sure.
I was
Yeah.
allowed to write almost all the episodes before any kind of green light decision was made. I mean, that meant I took a risk because it could have not happened and I'd have spent an awful long time doing that. But I had a feeling, you have to go with your hunches, don't you? And I had a good
Yeah.
feeling about it. I felt like this is proper. It felt like it had an epic quality, which I think you need for this kind of storytelling. So it was, but it was daunting. I mean, I used all my instinctive Le Carre knowledge. So, for example, Perfect Spy, I don't know how well people know that book, but there's an incredible relationship between Magnus Ping and Axel,
Mm.
which is a relationship fraught with betrayal and attraction, and it's very moving. I definitely use that as influence in some very loose sense, but I never sort of, not in a rational going back and just feeling wise, just going, that sort of relationship where you don't quite know who's betraying who, who's playing who, and it ends up also being loving, which was the thing I was most interested in. Um, and even Carla Smiley is a loving relationship extraordinarily. Um, I I think that's what I wanted to honor was the love that Le Carre found within betrayal. I think that's such a uniquely Le Carre thing.
Well, you sort of jumped onto the point I was going to make, and people will say like some things feel like some of the movies feel very Bondian, that they've taken things from James Bond. Without having source material, you've made this story feel very. I don't want to. I'm going to make up a term, Lacarian. There we go.
Yeah.
That's now in the universe. Congratulations, and. But I think congratulations to you in the first part for making it thematically feel like it's connected to the first and second season are united in that sense. But it feels right. It feels the vibe is right, and the characters are there. So was that something you were conscious of during the process, I suppose, then, of trying to keep it in that fold of Le Carre?
Oh yeah. I mean, yeah, and that's why I couldn't do it before because I
Yeah,
didn't feel it would be.
yeah,
Yeah, no, completely. I mean, it didn't mean that doesn't mean that in every time you sit down to write a scene, you're thinking that, not remotely.
no.
That otherwise that would just it's just instinctive. But definitely at the outset and in the conceptual thinking it's and basically actually a lot of it was about staying stubborn around if for example people would say, oh, well, maybe for the plot you should not have Teddy go on this, you would say no, the thing that matters here is this journey of this man and the fact that Pine becomes his handler and his what I call secret sharer, which is another amazing Joseph Conrad story of this notion
Mm,
that you have someone in the world who you secretly share with and you don't tell anyone, which is obviously what a spy handler is. But it's more than that. It's your he's kind of like a confessor as well, right?
mm,
And a lover. And I think I said that's the thing that matters most, and that I will not give up on. And everything else, the plot, everything else can change and metamorphose in different ways as we go on the journey. But that is sacred because that's the thing that everyone will care about, and that's why when you get to the extraordinary ending, and Hugh is just so frightening in that ending. I can't even say why, just in case I won't say what happens. But it's just such a that's why it's satisfying because it is you've earned the right emotionally to have such a tremendously extreme ending.
mm.
Well, I was going to ask about that because, how does it change in terms of the writing of this season when you have a follow-up versus like the first one where you just have the book and you're going, I'm just making a one, season
Yeah.
story.
Well, I structured it as it's not like it's a three. It is three parts.
Yeah.
Right.
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
yeah, because I learned from last time, I was like, okay, now I've understood. So now, and also I like trilogies. I think there's something about three that works very well, and it was very enjoyable to think, okay, we can. I don't have, for example, I don't have to end this one and resolve everything satisfactorily. I can actually do the opposite, and that's
Hmm.
useful. But it's also very dynamic. I think people were shocked, and I think that's good because I think the world's a pretty tough place at the moment, and I think it is sometimes no, sometimes good for television not just to give the easy answers to things, and so that was satisfying for that reason, but also of course, yeah, it gives me a launch pad for the third season, and that will be the last one of this story. I mean, that's as far as I'm concerned, that's I've always made that really clear, and everyone's very satisfied with that.
Well, we're talking about the spoilers then. Perhaps we'll put the Hugh Laurie one side. Of course, he is the big bad of the season, and shock horror, he will be returning in season three. You get very much a sort of the downbeat before hopefully the hero triumphs in season three. We will see. But there is one sad moment at the end of that episode, which is Olivia Colman.
Yeah. So there are two. Yeah, there were two big deaths at the end, which might as well go there. One of
Yeah.
them, the first, which isn't Olivia Colman, was inevitable and was always going to happen. The
Yes.
Olivia Colman
Hmm.
one was a discussion, an honest discussion. But I felt I really liked her story in season two. She's as fairly obviously very very busy, and nobody gets Olivia Colman for 6 months of the year. So we I think made judicious decisions in this one to make her journey very interesting. Like it's quite dramatic, her arc from someone who basically has lied to Pine, and which in a sense is the whole reason the thing happens, and then go on this journey towards some kind of redemption. There was then this discussion about what do we do, and it was my idea. I said I have an instinct that we should not try and drag, we should not extend this relationship beyond where it maintains its drama, and we could do something much bolder and much simpler. And she loved it. I mean, she was very mixed blessings about it, because it is a strange show for everybody in terms of the length of time it's taken means that people have grown up. Like Tom, for example, didn't have children when he did season 1, and Olivia literally had her child in her belly when she made season. So there's a very emotional family element to this show, which is different to something when you make things quickly. And so I think for her it's very complex feelings, but on the other hand, I think she also, the last thing she wanted was to do something where she just ends up on, being on the end of the phone to Pine for the whole of season, the way that.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably a decision that was the hardest one to make, but I don't regret it now. I feel pleased and that we did it. And it also again sets up a very strong moral imperative for people to do something about it in season 3.
Quite so.
It also like cuts off Pine from all of his support network, because even Teddy, who you can say is very unreliable perhaps as a ally, is someone who is at least offering a potential olive branch. So now you leave him alone, basically. Which
and
is
you've
a great
also
setup.
lost, and we've lost Basil, the wonderful Paul Chahidi, as well. So I mean that was a conscious thing to go, okay, let's literally rip him apart here, and that creates really challenges but interesting opportunities.
Yeah.
Well,
I have a nerdy question I have to ask.
Love that.
Now, Tom Hiddleston has talked publicly about his love of the movie Heat.
Yeah.
And you have the scene at the restaurant with Roper and Pine. Was that an homage to Heat knowingly?
It was slightly the other way around, in that the storiness, suddenly I was like, okay, this is great. They have to meet. And if they're going to meet, they have to meet alone. And it has to be worth it, and it has to be good. And then of course you go, there's a film a bit like that, and I knew that Tom loved it, so it was that way around. It wasn't like, okay, let's do a homage to Heat, because it was, but as soon as it occurred to me, I did think, oh yeah, there's something very similar in a very good film by Michael Mann. So we did it, and I like our one. I think it's great. I think Hugh is really, really scary at the end, but I think there's great affection between them. The two men, the actors, love each other very dearly, and so you have this very interesting counterpoint between different,
like a push and pull
types of emotion
between them.
Yeah.
And you can see it. There's scenes, moments between them. But some of the most powerful stuff in season 2 is when Tom and Hugh are staring at each other.
Yeah. Georgie, the amazing director who did season 2, did all of it. She's just the most wonderful woman. She talked absolutely about that, although it's a spy story and there's lots of plot, for her it was all about that central triangle, really, fundamentally. Maybe a little bit of Roxy as well, but fundamentally Teddy, Roper, Pine. This extraordinary triangle of love, hate, betrayal, and that's what she basically zoned in on that completely all the way through.
Well, I think the Night Manager fans, before perhaps we move on to Hannah in a second, would be remiss if I didn't ask a couple of questions about the future. Season 3.
I'm not allowed to say very much.
No spoilers. Don't worry. We're assured season 3 is on the way. That's happening. That's all being done.
Seems to be good.
Good. Firstly, could we have some Jed in our life? Or I'm a big Sally fan. I'd like some more Sally, please.
I at the moment don't want to say anything about anything. Except that I agree with you. I mean, Sally's played by Hayley Squires, who's just the most fabulous actress, and I mean, she is also wonderfully alive, which is a rare gift at the end of season 2. So that's exciting, and I think I would love to do more with her. I think she's really special. The Jed story is it interests me too, but it's also, what I'd say now is that I think there is something fundamentally alone about Pine, which has always led me to not try and extend relationships beyond their natural course. It didn't feel strange to me. And can you imagine the conversation, obviously, coming into season 2, people going, what about Jed? What about Jed?
Yeah.
And it was never once occurred to me that she would be in it. It was a strange thing. I just didn't feel it. And I often couldn't articulate it. I was just like, I just don't feel it, because it felt too conventional, put simply.
Sure.
And I rationalized it to myself as being, he doesn't want to do more damage to her. She has gone back to a child. That is the last thing he wants to do, is to be responsible for that again. And I think it makes sense. And Tom had no problem. Tom understood that completely.
Yeah.
He was like, no, it's something that was very scary. She nearly dies. She's tortured very horribly, and he got away with it, and he won't get away with it again. So put it away. So I think what that leaves me with is a very interesting challenge for Pine's character about his relationship to love, and specifically to romantic love.
I think what it left, like, from a perspective of me watching it, just talking about my process through it, was Roper's back in the UK now.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? Like that is the big, like, time bomb for me with Roper in the UK. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's very exciting. It's very exciting just to imagine him there. That pleases me. Yeah.
Yeah, and I have to say, like, we have to set a date, because we're only talking about season 2. We'll have to have you back at the end of season 3 for the full debrief, because then we can talk spoilers about that too. But we love both seasons, and I'm sure we'll talk about Night Manager again. I can't wait for season 3. I'm sure everyone else at home is in agreement of that. But I want to get to Hannah.
Sure.
I think it was like the 7th, 8th, 9th film we ever tackled on this show.
Oh wow!
6 years ago. It was just a random pick. It was like, we want to pick from a certain decade. Saoirse Ronan, interesting character, actress.
Yeah.
And I had no grounding going into that film. Bowled me over. Yes, some of the symbolism, all the fairy tale stuff weaved into it. It's a very deep tome. There's a lot to it, and I think it doesn't get enough love. And so I want to spend a little time talking about Hannah, the TV show, and the film. So when did you get brought into the world of Hannah, the film?
So it was the first film I ever wrote. I was invited to. So Seth Lockhead had written a first draft, and I was invited by a wonderful woman, Teresa Moneo, Spanish producer working for Focus at the time. It's a very normal thing in film. Sometimes where someone has written something and there's promise, and they're not quite sure, how to get from promise to having something that would absolutely work. And I read it, and I had a feeling like, oh yes, I understand, what Seth's after. I understand what this is about to some extent. And so I did my rewrite, which was, I suppose it was quite different, but it definitely took Seth's starting point. A very strong idea of a girl brought up by her father in the forest, and of course, it then depended upon who would direct it, I think, and this is a really important difference in film. Film is the whole character of a film is dictated by the director, and so there was a bit of Danny Boyle interest at one point, and then it would be in one kind of film, and I worked with him quite closely for a while. It was really interesting. A few weeks that didn't work out for reasons. He had another movie, and these things happen all the time. But I really liked working with him, and it was fun. And he was very interested in, for example, and this is important for a later discussion about the TV show. He was very interested in the origin story of where actually did she come from, and how did it work, and what was the precise nature of her, and so on. Then Joe Wright comes on board, and it's a completely different thing. Joe is I don't know if you know, but Joe's parents run a tiny puppet theatre. I think this tells you absolutely everything you need to know about Joe Wright in Islington in London. It's very famous, called The Little Angel. And everything I think about his artistic vision is dictated by what I've always imagined him being sort of a kid and watching puppet shows. Very good ones, by the way. And so he has this fairy tale puppet world. If you think of many of his films, there's just so much of this all the way through. I mean, the most obvious one is his version of Anna Karenina. And he just took it to a fairy tale, completely different space, and was not remotely interested in the origin story of what really happened in the dystopian past when Hannah, which I was interested in, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And that was cool. And so Joe did his thing with it, and it's a brilliant film on that. And it's Wicked Witch, it's Kate Blanchett, it's definitely Wizard of Oz with those shoes. It's got all these much more fantasial elements that are pure Joe Wright. And it's a very special film. I think I really love the fact you love it. I think it's great because it is a really weird melange of spy movie and fantasia, and it kind of works. I think it partly works because Saoirse Ronan is so astonishing, I think I mean, it's a brilliant piece of casting again by him because, of course, he brought her from Atonement. So yeah, that was a very special thing, but it did leave some untold story for me to then do when Tom Cohen suggested we do the TV show.
Well, that's actually I went back and listened to our episode on that many years ago, and one of the things that we said is we would love to have had a little bit more of why
Why
Hannah, like the
precisely?
why.
Yeah,
And I understand it's a 2 hour film less than you need to be economical with what you're doing.
yeah.
You can't do the whole scientific background stuff. But a TV
But the
show,
script did do that, and
yeah.
Joe made a clear decision. He said,
Okay.
he said it's not the thing I'm interested. And I was totally. I mean, hey, I was just thrilled to have a film being made, but also I was very respectful of him. He's a very wonderful director, and that's.
Hmm.
But there was this script. There was this whole last section where she ended up going back to where she came from. And that didn't happen in the film, which was he wasn't interested in it. He wanted the big face off between Marissa and her, fairground. It was fantastic.
Hmm.
But it did leave a very wonderful opportunity to go back.
Well, I'm curious, like, how different was the film that you were basically writing before Joe Wright came on?
I mean, lots of things that none of the characters were. You know what I mean? It's the way he
Yeah,
done, the way he did, like Tom Hollander's version of his character, whose name I can't even remember now.
it's
Uh,
incredible.
is nothing
Incredible.
like the version of the character that I had in my head. But that's, that was, it was astonishing to look at it. I was like, wow, that's a different way of playing that. Even Marissa, I had a far more realistic reading,
Mm.
closer to what we did with Murray,
Yeah.
even in the TV show. Um, but I loved it. I mean, I loved it. It was like, okay, you can take what I'd done as a fairly grounded, because I thought my responsibility is a very high concept idea is to ground this and make this feel as believable as possible. And I think
Mm.
some of that
Right.
pays off because the plotting's quite good. And
Yeah.
but then he just goes, yeah, kind of, and then just goes off on these extraordinary madcap fantasias that are just beautiful and very, very unique to him. And it taught me a lot about film, and that you have to go do that with film. You have to have your grounding, but you have to let the director, put their signature on it.
And the actor too. I mean, I think I've read an interview with Tom Hollander about the whistle that he does in the
Yeah,
film. Like that's I think came up with on the set, and
yeah,
then the Chemical Brothers turned it into a song on the soundtrack. Like
yeah, that's it.
that's acting going, and that's an actor coming and putting their stamp on it, and it just going bigger with the soundtrack.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Tom obviously also in Night Manager, weirdly. So
Hmm.
Tom
Mm.
is a stupendously intelligent guy, and he's one of these people that you go to. He's very rare for an actor. You almost go, oh, do improvise, because he just comes up with stuff
Yeah.
that is just so hilarious and so maverickly. He needs the writing to tell him who he is. He needs that. He's very honest about that.
Hmm.
He needs the script, but he does then just create these moments of complete magic on his own.
Well, one of my follow up questions was going to be, well, actually, I think it will lead us into the TV show quite beautifully. And it sounds like there was things that you had planned for the story of the film that didn't make it, like the ending.
Yeah.
And then maybe take us into the journey of getting that phone call, coming back into it, and what sort of enticed you about wanting to come back to the character.
Well, it was that. It was. So I remember the phone call. It was I met him. So would you meet Tom? He's interested in Hannah. Yes. I go into a little lunch, and I'm expecting a kind of suited LA exec because he's American. And of course, he's this kind of, he got a kind of cardigan, and he's a completely different kind of guy. And I immediately warned him and thought, oh, he's just gorgeous. And we're very close friends now. And he said, is there anything you feel unexplored in this story?
Mm.
And of course, I was like, well, literally the last 20 pages of the script, and I almost showed it to him. I said, look, this is what actually in the script would have happened. And he was like, wow. She goes back to the facility. I said, yeah, she goes back to the facility, and there's all these dogs because they'd been living, and it's just wild. And then there's the whole thing around actually what they were doing in the facility, and
Hmm.
this horrible backstory, which we then did in the TV show, which
Yeah.
about Eric's complicity with that. And he just said, "This is great TV. This is great TV." And then it was, it was his concept. He said, "Look, if we get this right, we can do a first season that sort of starts doing the same thing as the film, but in a different way, and then goes beyond it. And then if that's successful, we can take her beyond and go and kind of do a coming of age story of this woman who's sort of trying to come back into the world." And of course, it was just like a gift. I gave him enormous credit because he just saw an opportunity, and it's very unusual coming of age story, and
Uh,
it works. So all the things that all teenagers or have to do, she has to do 100 times fold because she's had
Mhm.
no upbringing in that world whatsoever. And I think some of my favorite stuff is just simply her acclimatizing to the strange emotional curiosities of being a teenager and family
Yeah.
life and all the stuff that we all do.
Which is some of the most beautifully tender moments in the show and the movie, is just the innocence of
Yeah.
it. You know,
Yeah.
you can have all these moments of like gore and guts and guns and all the gadgets and all that sort of stuff, the spy stuff,
Yeah.
as it were. But it is ultimately about a girl who is without a rudder, without a compass. She's trying to find her own way in the world and has no bearing or grounding apart from this training, this
Yes.
instinct.
That's it.
And I think that's what's really beautiful about it.
Oh, that's beautifully put, Scott. Thank you. Yeah, and it makes me think about the Spice stories. Fundamentally, almost all of them are about identity in some way. In her case, she doesn't really genuinely know who she is, and even when she finds out the factual element of her origin, that doesn't really answer the question because she is
No.
who she decides to be. I mean, I think about the Bourne films, which were very inspirational for me, and they're all about a guy who can't remember who he is. So there's this very simple thing often that sits underneath these things, and for her, I think that's what it is. It's a desire to know who she is and then also to create who she is through her actions.
I want to ask about with the first season, you're saying to kind of go through the events of the movie, but basically, remix them in a way where the audience feels like they haven't quite seen it. But how do you, going in, feel like you're going to hold the audience because there's a certain percentage that have seen the movie
Yeah, sure.
and the
That
concern about, well, hold on, they're going to watch episode 1 and 2 and be like, I've seen this, check out.
Yeah, that was a worry. That was definitely a worry. We made a decision to go for it, to do the opposite, to slow it down and to take our time with characters. For example, the family she meets on the road.
Hmm.
In the film they're great, but they're quite fun and they're gone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was an opportunity to take it slower and to draw and to just get you involved in character. So we could have gone either way. We could either have accelerated it and gone, let's get it done, or we went the other way, which was risky. And I was really not sure it was going to work, to be absolutely honest. And I was like, but I think by slowing it and and I think Esme was, she's just a different kind of actress. She's not as quite as otherworldly as Saoirse, but she's very truthful and you can watch her forever. So in those scenes, you just felt like, yeah, we can sit with her and we can take our time here. We took the risk, and then of course the payoff at the end of the season is that you get the stuff you really haven't seen before.
Hmm.
So if you can get that far, you're going to carry on into season two because this is completely new terrain. I think the whole last episode is maybe even more than that. Is totally new. You
Hmm.
haven't seen anything
Yeah.
like this at all. Maybe even more than that. But it definitely, I'm not gonna lie. That was the one thing Tom and I were like, is this going to work? Are we going to be
Hmm.
able to? Now, the only thing I'd say was also a little bit, it was a good 8 years since the
Hmm.
film.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
quite a long time. And certainly in terms of young people, if you were, I don't know, 18 when you were 16, 17 when you watched the film, you were 25, you'd have been 10 to be 18 now. So we weren't, and Amazon were supportive of that. They weren't as worried as we were, to be absolutely honest.
I suppose my last question on Hannah is, you stayed with the show for the 3 seasons it
Yes.
ran for. What was it about the character that kept you coming back? Because it's a big commitment. I think 22 episodes are made in the end. That's a lot of your time.
Yes, I mean, most of my responsibility is just always about wanting to do the
Yeah.
story,
Hmm.
and I had a very clear ending for it. I knew exactly what that ending that we have,
Yeah.
and I just thought it'd be very moving and just right. And I really wanted to get there. It's TV is a little scary because you can get cut off, as everyone knows, at any
Hmm.
time
Yeah.
for all
Yeah.
sorts of different reasons. And whereas I guess if you write books, you know you can do it, even though maybe no one will, maybe you will read it, but you can do it yourself. There's no, so I just had this absolutely desperate desire to get to the end and make that a complete thing. With the actors that I had, Murray, I think is just a beautiful actress, underrated in my view.
Mm.
Very subtle and nuanced actor, not as dramatic as Kay. I mean, nothing like as, but she's just got this lovely, quiet truth. Well, not that Kay doesn't have truth; she's got massive truth, but she's just a much
Yeah.
bolder
Well,
thing.
the sharpening the fangs and all that kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
all
sure.
of that
Yeah, yeah,
stuff. Yeah, could be. Oh,
yeah,
That's Joe Wright's thing as well.
yeah, yeah.
But I really wanted that final scene, and then of course, I mean, we got threatened by COVID. We thought we might be cancelled completely by COVID, not by Amazon, but by the literal conditions that we were having to
Sure.
make it in. In that it was awful. We were in I wasn't. I couldn't get there. We were in Prague in terms of making it, and it was incredible that they got it made at all, and we had to reduce the number of episodes. It was a proper thing. It was difficult, and
Mm.
I give huge credit to everyone involved. Actually, we got it done, and done very, very well.
Well, I think it's good that it stands as a piece of work. Like you got to
Yeah.
tell your Hannah story, as it were.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. And I was really pleased there was a sort of in the light of the Night Manager, there was like a kind of 20 great spy characters and she was in there. And that weirdly made me more proud than the Night Manager. I guess because in the end the carrier wrote Jonathan Pye. I was like, okay, this is really cool. That and she's great for I think young women need those role models.
Yeah.
I think he is a great role model in a very weird way.
Well, we consistently see like a lot of female-led spy movies that don't seem to do that well these days, and it beggars belief because I mean, that could be due to writing, directing, all sorts of things. Casting could go wrong, but I think there is a need to have that space in this genre because it is very male-dominated.
It's massively male dominated. I've got two daughters, and that they I think I partly did it for them. I
Mm.
genuinely do. They were the right age. I just thought this they need this kind of story. And yeah, you're right. I mean, there were quite a few movies that I remember after the film came out quite
Yeah.
quickly.
Hmm.
It was like a little burst. Everyone was like, "Oh, this is the new thing," and then it sort of faded away.
Yeah.
And I haven't. You're right. I haven't seen anything that's really landed for a while, which is a real shame because there's no reason for it whatsoever.
No, but they're still trying, which I'm happy about,
Yeah,
and we do our best to celebrate wherever we can. But
that's great.
it
Yeah,
is I want that. I don't want a female James Bond. I hate that argument. But what I want is an equivalency. I
yeah,
want their own character that they can champion in their
yeah.
own spaces. I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, women. I've written, I think, more female leads. That Manager is my big exception than I have
Mm.
men, and I love writing female. There's so much. I did Midwich Cuckoos, even turning Burr into Angela Burr just felt so much more for me rich.
Hmm.
All
Hmm.
this, it's just way more rich in terms of her relationship with Pine, this strange maternal thing going on, but she's pregnant. It just felt fabulous. It felt much more complicated and much more exciting. So I just feel like it's a space that everyone should just, and obviously the obvious thing is you need more female writers writing because that's the truth of it all. It's
Hmm.
still, I think, a very male dominated sphere, authorially.
Here, here. Well, we said we get you out at a certain time, so we're going to speed round us out. Okay. I mean, the question I generally ask, firstly, would be, we've spoken about Night Manager, we've spoken about Hannah. I would urge everyone who hasn't watched Hannah, the TV show or the film, to go and check both those things out. As if you're Night Manager fans, you will find things to love in both. But is there something outside those two projects that you're very proud of that you think people should go and check out that you've worked on, be it on the stage or on screen?
Well, you can't check out the stage. The heartbreak of theatre. It's gone. It's just gone. I think I would probably have to mention my film, The Ones Below, which is it's a much smaller thing, made about 2015, 16, but
Mm,
it uses, I think, the same, it's a I'd loosely call it Hitchcockian, but
okay.
it's a domestic thriller,
Right.
psychological thriller, some people might say, but it uses the spy. It is about spies, but within a domestic sphere. It's about people invading each other's spaces, and it's about two couples. And it did very nicely when it came out. It went to festivals, but like a lot of films, it floats away on the ether. But it's still out there somewhere. So I would like to give a shout out to my movie. Yeah.
Well, that's exactly what this is for. So if and it's got spy connections, the SpyHards listeners love a bit of that. So there you go. We'll have a link in the show notes. People can go and find that online.
Oh, thank you.
Next question, and I know the answer is because it's the Night Manager season 3. But what are you up to now?
Yeah, so that dominates the conversation,
Mhm.
definitely. So I'm middle of that at the moment, writing that, which will take most of the year, because we're not
Sure.
going. I mean, we're not going to take as long as we did last time, my goodness, but we're not going to rush. I think
Hmm.
that lesson has been strongly learned by everyone. You just don't rush this stuff. So, but it might be another year or so before we begin to think about shooting.
Right.
And that everyone's really cool with that, which is nice. We don't know yet for certain, but I don't. It's not the kind of thing where we're going like right, bang it on in July, and because it's just a bit too difficult to do.
And conversely, it's also not one of those things where like, oh, there'll be a season 3, and then it dithers away and nothing happens. Everyone's working on it.
Yeah,
We're pushing forward. So it's
that's
a
right.
positive. It's coming, just not next week.
Exactly that. Exactly that. It's but definitely not in 10 years' time. My goodness, no. So that is dominating it. I mean, obviously, I always work on one or two other things to keep myself entertained. It's very healthy to do that as well.
Of
And
course.
I've written a play, and there's some TV ideas still floating. My one unanswered itch is to go back to film,
Mm,
um, because I think really Hannah and then the ones below the film I made, and then really very little else in the film sphere that I'm proud of. So
mm.
It's a very, and I love cinema. That's the thing we've not really talked about, but I mean, I'm much more cognizant with cinema than television.
You're about to get a chance to talk about film. This is our outro question, so you'll
Oh,
get your
cool.
moment in the sun. Don't worry, it's
Hey,
coming.
great.
And I always picture, so when I'm talking to someone who's writing something, if you want to put two background characters that get blown up by something, you can call them Cam and Scott. I just think that's great. Completely inept. Maybe they work at MI5. Maybe they change the,
Oh
the
yeah,
printer
like the Night
toner.
Owls. Yeah, great.
Yeah, yeah. If you'd like, I feel personally blessed if you did. But anyway, I won't chase you for royalties. Don't worry. But the final question, David, and this has been asked to every single person that's ever been on this show. So there's no pressure, but there are
God.
6 years worth of back catalogue for us to compare you to.
Wow. I better be original then.
Well, that does help. But we love spy films here. It's
Yeah.
in the name, SpyHards. So we want to know, David Farr, from you, what is your favorite spy movie of all time?
Well, it's boring. I'm gonna have to. The only one that ever comes to my mind is The Third Man, and that's really disappointing.
It's
Um,
not as often said as you think.
okay, Third Man, but it is the best. It is for me, unquestionably. Um, it's just such a stunning and perfect thing. But I would put a shout out for a French movie by Melville called Le Samouraï, with
Yeah.
Alain Delon. I
Mm-hmm.
think if people want to understand how to make a film with very little dialogue that is absolutely, and it's a stunning character portrait. I think it's just called The Samurai in English, but everyone seems to call it Le
The
Samurai.
Samurai, yeah.
Uh, so if you want a different one, I will offer you that as well because it's completely sensational.
That's actually been a film that has been debated in our online circles as the one we should cover or not. And I think now you giving it that stamp of approval probably just pushed it over the line.
My only question is, would you really call it a spy movie? It's sort of an assassin movie.
Yeah.
You might exclude it, but it sort of has this quality of unknownness that makes me feel it's very influential, totally massively influential. I mean, most obviously on David Fincher's recent thing with Michael Fassbender, but there's so many people who've been influenced by that film and everything it does. Yeah, and there's like so many.
You're going to get like 20 more and email me afterwards and be like, Scott, what about
Fantastic.
this?
I know. The parallax view, but that's not really a spy movie
No,
either.
I will take that. That's a good one.
We covered it.
Yeah.
No, I mean I can go on forever.
Okay.
The one thing I'm nuts about is cinema. It's the thing I feel sad that I haven't done more of.
Hey, there's plenty of time.
There's plenty of time.
Third Man, The Samurai, and Parallax View as a nice trifecta. Why not? What a nice triple
Well,
bill.
He said
That
he
would be
likes
a great
trilogies.
triple bill.
Yeah,
Sorry,
trilogies.
Cam.
Well,
Yeah,
you
that's
said
a
you like
great
trilogies,
trilogy.
so there's a trilogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a great trilogy. Put on in your rep cinema.
Yeah. We'll open one day. It won't do well, but we'll do it anyway. David, it's been a genuine pleasure. We will have to do this again when season 3 is out in the
Yes,
wild.
please.
But thank you so much for your time.
Thank you both. Thank you very much.